Hello and welcome back. My name is Paige Elizabeth and I am so excited today because we are diving into a whole new project. We are going to be doing a deep dive on all of the viral Booktok Romantasy books, whether it was viral years ago or it's viral now. We're gonna read it, we're gonna tier list it, and we're gonna figure out if it's actually worth reading. Obviously, tier lists are completely based on opinion, so it's gonna be a little bit biased, but I think that I've managed to set it up in a way that will help you know whether or not you want to read the book regardless of my opinion. Hey! Funny story, my camera died during the beginning of my filming yesterday and a bunch of the footage got deleted. Yay! So I'm here as future Paige to fill you in a little bit on what got deleted. Let's get down to business, okay?
Let's get down to business.
The plan for this Romantasy deep dive is to read all of those viral books that have just been flying around Booktok and then add them to this Romantasy tier list as we go. Today, because I've already read a chunk of these popular books, we're gonna get a little bit acquainted with our grading rubric by adding the books that I've already read to the tier list to establish a sort of baseline understanding of how the system can help give recommendations to a variety of readers. So let's get into the actual tiers. All the way at the top, we've got New Personality Unlocked, okay? These are for the books that are not only really well written, really well balanced in terms of fantasy and romance, have incredible characters, a really fun plot. They also, in addition to all of that, have that like extra sinking quality of just like digging itself into your bones. This book will entirely consume you. Just below that tier, we've got Please read this. And this is for the books that have all of those incredible qualities, but you know, maybe it just isn't an all-time favorite like the higher tier is. Then is one of my favorite tiers on the list, and that is the sweet treat tier. Everybody deserves a sweet treat, okay? These books will have your stomach turning, your feet kicking, your mouth giggling. They're gonna have all of those baseline requirements in the romantasy genre, but in this tier, maybe the quality of the overall like formulation of the book has maybe decreased a little bit, you know? But these are the perfect books to go to when you don't want to think, when you're trying to not use your brain and you just want like a fun romantic interest to obsess over and an easy book to just fly through and satisfy that scratching itch in your brain. The next tier is Not For Me, but the but in the Not For Me, but tier is very important because these are going to be the romantasy books that for a variety of reasons are not for me. But I would still recommend these books to other people for specific reasons. And so this is kind of a case-by-case tier where we can go through the books and I can say like, hey, I didn't like it because of this, this, and this, but I think readers that really enjoy this would like it. And we'll get into a little bit more of that when we actually start to put books onto the tier list. It'll be clear. It'll be more clear. Then we have the DNF tier. In this tier, of course, these are the books that I don't finish. I'm usually the kind of person that will push through a book and finish it, even if it's not really something that I'm absolutely loving. So for me to DNF a book, it's most of the time gonna be something that I like wouldn't even really recommend to other people at all. But there are exceptions to the rule, which again, we'll get into when we actually start putting books into the category. And lastly, one of the most important tiers on this list, Someone Lied. These books are not romantasy books. Let's talk about what a romantasy book is. Fantasy romance, romantasy, is a book that has fantastical elements involved in the world and also in the actual story of the book, as well as a romance plot that is central to the story and crucial. This book wouldn't really be happening without the romantic elements of it all. That's a little bit vague, but the genre spectrum is also vague. There's a lot of books that vary more toward the fantasy side or more toward the romance side that would still be considered a romantasy, but the books on this tier, Someone Lied, those are not romantasy books. Now back to past Paige. She'll pick it up from here. The first book in this Romantasy Reads lineup happens to fall into this category of not being romantasy. And that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Let's add it to the tier list. someone lied. This is not a romantasy book. The romance plotline of the main character in the Cruel Prince series is not crucial to the plot. It's not a romantasy. Someone lied. Also, kind of a side note, but I do feel like I'm missing some of the viral romantasy reads. So if anybody thinks of any that are not on the list that they feel like need to be included in this experiment, please let me know so I can add it. And this can totally be something that grows along this journey. But continuing on with the books that I've already read, we can start to beef out this tier list. And next might be a little bit of a surprise. It is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And this book, to me, was a DNF. This is one of the exceptions to the DNF rule where I just wouldn't recommend it to anybody because that's not true in this case. I did think that the writing was really good, the story's very cute, but I just love something that's action-packed. And this book was mostly about like learning about fae in the woods with potentially a secret fairy helping out the main character. And so it was very cute, but I just can't do cozy. So if you do like cozy stories, I think this would be a wonderful romantasy read to check out, even though it was DNF for me. Next we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, which if you're watching this video, you know what Fourth Wing is. I feel like I don't need to explain this book to you, and it can be very, very polarizing, but I actually think this is a perfect example of not for me, but I didn't like the plot because the pacing was a little off and there were some things that just, quite frankly, didn't make a whole lot of sense. I also didn't really love the plot of the romance, which was pivotal in this story for sure, but was really, really slow and then really, really fast all at once. So this book wasn't for me. All that to say, this book was not for me, but I do think that this is an excellent read for somebody that's looking for a sweet treat where kind of a YA style isn't going to bother them, or you're really into the shadow boy love interest because that's kind of a huge part of this story. Or if you're somebody that's new to fantasy, I do think that this is a really fun way to intro into a more fantasy style story if you're mostly reading romance. But it just wasn't for me. Next is a book that I actually read pretty recently, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and this is a please read this kind of book for me. Oh my god. The writing is really well done. The plot is so interesting. I would say that this leans a little bit more toward the fantasy side than the romance side. Romance is a pretty pivotal part of this book, but I did think that the fantasy aspect was better than the romance. But it was so good that I'm truly and genuinely begging you to read this, okay? The names in this book are a little bit wild. I probably would not recommend this duology to a newer fantasy reader because you do really have to like suspend your disbelief and really be into the magic of it all because it has one of those complex magic systems that like is really at the root of everything that's going on. And I talked about this in a recent video as well, but there's this quality that some books have where everything sort of starts to turn into like this crazy fever dream of magic at the end, and this duology has that quality for sure. Okay, moving on to another super recent read, Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole, which is a sweet treat. To me, this is the definition of a sweet treat book. It has all of that romantic tension that just leaves you yearning for more, and it has a bunch of fantasy staples like kingdoms and conflict and magic, but it's not the highest quality book. So this is perfect when you're craving a sweet treat. Then we have Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which I actually feel like might be a bit of a surprise because this is a new personality I'm not gonna I actually think it might be kind of obvious considering I did make an entire video about crafting bride-themed things for my friend because we both loved this book so much. But Bride is a bit different than the books that we've talked about so far, and it's a rare addition to the book list. There aren't a ton of urban fantasy books on this list, which is just a fantasy story that takes place in like modern day contemporary times, and Bride does, of course. Bride is literally a perfect book that I would absolutely recommend to most people. It is an adult romance, it's got explicit scenes, and it is paranormal. It's that kind of subgenre of fantasy, so it has vampires and werewolves. And there are certain things that come along with that specific genre of romance. I love Bride though. I think it's phenomenal. I think if you like romance, you should absolutely check it out. And I love that Ali Hazelwood ventured into this world, even though she mostly just writes like contemporary romances. It's so good. Now we're getting back into some controversial waters here though, because next is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And this was so viral. So many people loved this book, and I think that that is beautiful and wonderful. And so there are a lot of people that I would recommend this book to. For example, actually, the book A Study in Drowning so reminds me of the book Divine Rivals. If you have read only one of these books and you liked it, you have to read the other book. So like, I do think there's a huge audience for a book like Divine Rivals, but for me, I didn't get it. I'm being influenced by the TikTok perception here, if you can't tell. But like, I so deeply didn't understand the obsession with this book that I just feel like you should try it. I don't know. It feels like there was something broken in my brain that was not broken in other people's, and they all loved this book, which is great. I did think it was like well written and everything. It just wasn't my style. Not for me, but okay, now we're reaching a pillar of the romantasy world. And you're never gonna guess where I put it. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas is like the romantasy book. I did vlog the experience of reading this book, so if you want more in-depth thoughts that I believe are spoiler free, you can check out that vlog. But overview, I thought that the first like 75% was kind of slow and the last 25% was what was really good for me. And so I totally understand why people say like, no, you have to read the second book in the series. So I would put ACOTAR as an individual book into the sweet treat category. I think it's a really fun read. I'm even gonna put it over Spark of the Everflame. I actually think that would not be like, that's not really controversial take. Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent was a huge surprise to me personally. I expected this to be a sweet treat book, and I was wowed. Serpent and the Wings of Night for me was like, please read this. I need everybody to actually read this because the writing blew me away. The pacing was so good of the story, of the romance. It was really well done. And even though it's about vampires, which I was like not sure if I would enjoy the vibe of that going in, it actually reminded me a lot of the energy of the Fae in the ACOTAR books. They're like big juiced up dudes with six packs, I don't know, and wings. Don't the ACOTAR guys have wings? The last book that I have read on this list is For the Wolf by Hannah Witten, and this is another sweet treat, okay? It's a little bit different than ACOTAR and Spark, which are both sweet treats for the romance aspect of the story. I feel like that's kind of really what keeps you drawn in, even if you are super interested in the world and the plot and everything like that. It's really about the romance in your heart while you're enjoying it. And I think that For the Wolf was actually more about like the magic of the world for me. The romance was fun. It's like a Little Red Riding Hood loose kind of retelling because it's about this girl named Red who has to go live with the wolf because she's the second daughter, so her older sister is the heir, and Red has to go for the wolf, be for the wolf. But what really drew me to the story was the magic of it all. It's one of those like the woods is a magical character in this story type of vibe, and it also has that One Dark Window quality where everything kind of like gets a little wild at the end because like the root of the magic comes out, but it isn't quite as high as One Dark Window on the tier list for me because even though I love that quality in books, it doesn't quite pull it together in the end in the like perfectly satisfying way that something like One Dark Window does. So it was just missing that final conclusive like punch for me. But I remember it being well written and the fantasy and magical elements really pulling through in this book. And that's all we have for the list, which actually it's looking like a perfect little bell curve type of moment so far. So stay tuned, because it's gonna be quite the journey, and I'm excited. And tell me if there are any books that I'm missing. Please! I want to have them all. But I think that's all for this time. I hope it was maybe a little bit helpful, and I love you so much, and I will see you soon. Bye! One of the first books I'm gonna read is Quicksilver, and I'm really scared because it's 600 pages!